I froze, heart pounding, face flushed, as the door creaked open and my son stood there, wide-eyed. I'm Emily, 42. And that split-second moment changed everything. You see, I thought I had the house to myself, just a rare afternoon of peace, until Ryan, my stepson, came home early. What he saw, what I felt in that raw, vulnerable second, it wasn't just embarrassment. It was the moment I realized how deeply lonely I'd been, how starved for connection after years in a fading marriage. Have you ever been caught off guard like that, not just by someone walking in, but by your own unexpected emotions? Tell me, how would you handle a moment that shakes you awake inside? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk. The house felt unusually empty again as Mark left for another business trip. Emily stood in the quiet kitchen, her hand gently running across the familiar wooden countertop that had held so many memories. Over the past 3 years, Mark had grown increasingly distant. No more cozy evenings together, no more unconscious hand-holding, no more simple. Emily let out a sigh and headed upstairs to the bedroom, where she had taught herself to find small moments of joy. A cup of jasmine tea, her favorite soft blanket, and an unfinished book. She tried to feel strong, independent, but sometimes the silence itself stirred up a deep, aching sadness. In the past, when Mark was away, Emily could enjoy this private time. But ever since Ryan, Mark's son from his previous marriage, had come home after his term away at school, everything had changed. The house, once spacious, suddenly felt cramped, not because of a lack of space, but because of the strangeness, the invisible distance between two people who were never really close. Emily remembered clearly the first time she met Ryan. The tall young man with slightly messy hair and bright sparkling eyes had surprised her, not because of his appearance, but because of the curious, guarded look in his eyes, as if he were assessing a stranger. Back then, Emily had tried to smile, had tried to tell herself, just give it time, everything will be fine. But years had passed and that distance had never closed. Between them were awkward silences, dinners full of quiet, polite nods, superficial greetings. Emily had never dared to see Ryan as her own son, and Ryan, it seemed, had never looked at her as a mother. Today, knowing that Ryan had plans to go out with friends until late, Emily finally allowed herself to relax. She half closed the bedroom door, wrapped herself in the thick comforter, and quietly breathed in the faint scent of tea. Outside, the rain had begun to fall, each drop tapping softly against the window pane as if reminding her that everything out there was still moving, while she remained left behind. A thought crept into Emily's mind. Is this what the rest of my life will look like? Days when Mark was away, she would curl up in her room, quietly keeping company with books and tea. Days when Mark was home, she would play the dutiful wife, quietly waiting for attention that never came. Emily tightened her grip on the teacup, telling herself, just this one afternoon, enjoy it, give yourself a rest. But deep inside, she knew. She was longing for something more, something she didn't even dare to name. The afternoon rain grew heavier, distant thunder rumbling and making Emily flinch slightly. She slipped out of the blanket, walked down the hallway, checking the windows in each room. Suddenly, the sound of the front door slamming shut made her heart jump. Ryan had come home earlier than expected. Emily heard the familiar footsteps, the sound of sneakers brushing against the wooden floor, then the thud as he set his backpack down. She hesitated for a moment, then made her way to the kitchen, not wanting the usual awkwardness to settle between them again. "You're home early?" Emily called out, her voice gentle but slightly hesitant. Ryan looked up, a bit surprised, as if he hadn't expected her to initiate a conversation. "It's raining too hard, so we wrapped things up early." His voice was a little stiff, but at least he answered. Emily smiled softly, nodded, and turned to leave, but Ryan unexpectedly called after her. "Emily." She froze, turning back to look at him. "Yes." Ryan scratched his head, his eyes wandering absently to the floor. "Earlier, I saw your room light on. I wasn't bothering you, was I?" Such a small, simple question, but it made Emily pause for a second. She shook her head gently, trying to keep her voice natural. "No, not at all. I was just reading." There was a short silence. Then Ryan gave a shy little smile and hesitated. What do you like to read? Emily was slightly surprised. She hadn't thought he would care about something like that. She suddenly realized this might be the first time Ryan had asked her a personal question in all these years. Oh, classic novels. Lately, I've been rereading Emma by Jane Austen, Emily replied, her gaze softening. Ryan nodded, then unexpectedly added, I read Pride and Prejudice back in my first year of college. The professor made us read it, and I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. Emily let out a quiet, genuine laugh. A rare one. Really? I wouldn't have guessed you'd enjoy that kind of book. Ryan shrugged, a youthful flicker crossing his face. Surprising, huh? He fell quiet for a moment, then spoke more softly. Would you mind if I sat and had some tea with you? It's raining so hard, I don't really know what to do. Emily's heart gave a sudden, quicker beat. All these years, they had never really sat together for long unless Mark was home. She gave a small nod, her voice a bit unsteady. Yes, of course. The two of them sat at the kitchen table, listening to the gentle patter of rain outside the window. Emily brewed jasmine tea, the light fragrance filling the kitchen, making the air feel tender and warm. Ryan held the teacup, looking at it with mild curiosity. You really like tea, huh? Emily smiled. Yes, it helps me feel more at peace. Ryan nodded, quietly took a sip, then set the cup down. Emily, do you ever feel sad being home alone like this? The question made Emily pause slightly. She bit her lower lip, carefully choosing her words. Sometimes, but I've gotten used to it. I guess no one can completely avoid feeling lonely, right? Ryan was silent for a moment, then slowly said, I'm different. I never thought you'd feel lonely. Emily's eyes met Ryan's. In that moment, she realized that inside the boy she had always thought she couldn't understand, there had been observations, quiet concerns she had never noticed. In that unexpected moment, the invisible distance between them seemed to draw just a little closer. No need for many words, no need to force intimacy, just a cup of tea, a rainy evening, and a slow conversation. That was enough to begin mending the long-standing gaps between them. The rain continued to fall steadily outside the porch, each small drop tapping gently on the old tiled roof. The soft yellow glow of the kitchen light cast across Emily's face, revealing the tired shadows under her eyes that she had long tried to hide. Ryan gently rotated the teacup in his hands, his gaze fixed on the tiny swirling ripples on the surface. Suddenly he spoke, his voice hesitant but sincere. Emily, have you ever felt out of place? I mean, like being in your own home, but feeling like you don't really belong there? Emily froze, her vision blurring slightly. She hadn't expected him to ask that. In that moment, she looked at Ryan. Not as the child Mark had brought home, not as the son of an indifferent husband, but as a young man, full of confusion and longing to be heard. Yes, Emily breathed out softly, her lips curling into a sad smile. I think everyone feels that way, at least once in their life. Ryan nodded, leaning back in his chair, his eyes drifting up to the ceiling as if searching for answers in the tiny cracks above. Me too. At school, I always have to act like I'm okay, like I'm good enough. At home, I see Mark always busy, and you, it's like you're always keeping a bit of distance. I'm not blaming anyone, it's just. He paused, smiling faintly. I feel out of place too. Emily clenched her hands on the table, holding back the surge of emotion threatening to surface too clearly. I'm sorry, Ryan, she said quietly. Maybe I've been so busy worrying about everything that I forgot to think about how you were feeling. Ryan shook his head, his gaze softening. No, I'm the one who should apologize. I know it's not easy for you, being here in your position beside my dad. For a moment, the space between them fell silent, but it was no longer awkward. They looked at each other, as if seeing the other clearly for the first time after years of simply passing by in each other's lives. Emily smiled gently, her voice light. I remember when you were little, the first time I came to this house, you kept following me around asking such silly questions. Back then, I thought, I'm going to learn to love this child as my own. But then life got busy, and all these nameless distances just kept growing. Ryan lowered his head, laughing softly. I remember I once asked you what your favorite color was, what foods you liked, because I wanted to get you a birthday present, but didn't know where to start. They both laughed, a light, genuine laugh. That laughter seemed to soften the air around them as if the invisible walls between them had eased, even just a little. Bryant, Emily said softly, her voice tinged with a slight catch. Thank you for being here tonight. Ryan looked up, his brown eyes glowing with a gentle, unexpectedly mature warmth. You're not just my dad's wife, Emily. You're part of this family. I I need you to. Emily felt her heart tighten, then slowly release, filling with a strange, glowing warmth. All these years, she had believed she was just a shadow in this house. But it turned out there was a young heart quietly seeing her, quietly recognizing her presence all along. Outside, the rain began to ease. Inside the small kitchen, two lonely souls found each other through simple, quiet words. No promises, no demands, just a shared existence, the shared connection. It was late at night, the soft yellow glow of the kitchen light wrapping Emily and Ryan as if they were enclosed in a warm cocoon. Emily gently draped a light shawl over her shoulders and asked softly, would you like to stay and chat a bit more? I can make more tea. Ryan gave a small nod, the initial awkwardness in his eyes fading. Yes, if you don't mind. They moved to the living room where Emily turned on a small lamp, casting just enough light for them to see each other without being too harsh. Ryan sat on the couch, his shoulders slightly drawn in, while Emily sat across from him, hugging a pillow to her chest. The atmosphere quieted, no longer filled with polite questions or surface level talk. Only silence remained, the kind where breaths slowed, where both seemed to be weighing whether they should speak the truths they had hidden for so long. Emily spoke first, her voice contemplative. Ryan, do you know, there are nights when I lie next to Mark and feel like I'm lying there all alone. Ryan flinched slightly, but didn't interrupt. He listened, his eyes wide and genuine. Emily continued, her hands gripping the pillow tighter. I used to think I was strong, that if I just tried hard enough, I could keep this family whole. But over time, I realized I was merely existing, not truly living. Ryan leaned forward slightly, his voice soft. Emily, I've felt that too. Here, I used to think I was just the extra child, not sure where I fit into everything. But tonight, I realize we're both lonely in the same way. Those words pierced through the shell Emily had wrapped around herself. She gave a faint, bittersweet laugh. Yes, we're more alike than I thought. A cold gust of wind slipped through the slightly open window, making Emily shiver. Instinctively, Ryan got up, grabbed the blanket draped over the chair, and gently placed it over her shoulders. In that moment, Emily froze. Not because the gesture was grand, but because it had been so long since she had felt such simple, genuine care. Thank you, Emily whispered, lifting her eyes to meet Ryan's gaze. In his eyes, she saw no judgment, no burdens of obligation, only a rare, quiet understanding. Wait, Ryan sat down beside her, carefully keeping a respectful distance. Would you like to rest your head on my shoulder just so you can feel a little lighter for a while? Emily hesitated briefly, then nodded. She leaned her head lightly against Ryan's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breath. In that moment, Emily felt as if she were returning to a time long past, when she still knew how to trust, how to let go, how to allow herself to be soft. Ryan said nothing, just sat there, letting her rest against him. He didn't know what else to do, except to let her feel that he was there, quietly but steadfastly. A single tear slid down Emily's cheek, not out of sorrow, but because for the first time in years, she felt the warmth of someone beside her. Not Mark, not anyone else, but Ryan, the stepson she had once thought she only had the duty to care for, yet who, as it turned out, was silently filling the empty spaces within her that she hadn't even realized existed. In that room, the two lonely souls no longer needed words. They simply sat together, listening to heartbeats, to breaths, reminding each other that they were still seen, still touched, and most importantly, still able to feel. Emily continued to rest her head lightly on Ryan's shoulder, letting her thoughts drift. She heard the ticking of the wall clock, the soft sound of the wind tapping against the window pane, even the beat of her own heart. Ordinary sounds that now suddenly felt so vivid. Ryan didn't move, didn't ask anything more, simply sat quietly, offering her a place to lean. Emily silently appreciated that sensitivity. No need for comforting words, no need for forced reassurances, just a warm shoulder to remind her she was still a living person, still worthy of someone's care. After a while, Emily lifted her head, smiling gently. Thank you, Ryan. I didn't think I'd let myself be this vulnerable. Ryan gave a small shake of his head, his gaze tender. You're not being weak, Emily. You're just human. That simple sentence made Emily's heart soften. How long had it been since someone said something to her without blame, without attaching expectations? How long had it been since she dared to admit she needed comfort, that she wanted to be soothed? Are you hungry? I'll make some hot tea, Emily offered, standing up, trying to hide the slight tremble in her voice. Ryan nodded, getting up to help her prepare. Together, they rummaged around the kitchen, brewing a small pot of ginger tea. Ryan's hands were a bit clumsy as he tried to slice the lemon, and Emily let out a soft laugh. The first time in so many days, she had heard her own laughter, light, unforced. When they sat back down on the sofa, each holding a cup of hot tea, Emily spoke softly. Ryan, I know Mark hasn't always been a good husband. I've tried so hard, but Ryan rested his hands on his cup, his eyes turning serious. I know, Emily, I can see how lonely you are. Emily shivered. To hear someone voice the thing she had kept hidden, it felt like a weight lifted, but also like a dam breaking. Yes, I'm lonely. I feel like I'm only living to fulfill duties. Ryan took a deep breath, his voice slightly shaky. Me too. I always feel like I'm never good enough, never playing the right role, but tonight I feel closer to you, not because of family ties, but because we understand each other. In that moment, Emily reached out, gently placing her hand on Ryan's, giving a soft squeeze. Thank you, Ryan. You make me feel like I still matter, like I'm still a woman with feelings, with a heart. Ryan bowed his head slightly, a faint flush rising on his cheeks, but he didn't pull his hand away. Emily, you're the kindest woman I've ever met. I have always felt you deserve to be happy. Those simple words made Emily's back flush warm. She teared up, smiling softly. This, just this is enough, Ryan. Just knowing there's someone here to listen, to share. Ryan smiled, his eyes full of quiet trust. He shifted slightly closer, carefully, sensitively, never crossing any boundary, only making sure Emily knew one thing. She was no longer alone. That night, they didn't say much more. Emily rested her head on Ryan's shoulder, and Ryan gently draped a blanket over them both. They sat quietly, gazing out the window, where the moonlight spilled soft, gentle streaks across the ground. In Emily's heart, something quietly began to heal. Not because of grand promises, not because of a fiery love, but thanks to one genuine warm moment between two souls who had long been forgotten. The early sunlight slipped through the gap in the curtains, casting thin beams across the cold wooden floor. Emily blinked softly, feeling the morning breeze slip through the window crack and make her shiver lightly. She realized she was still sitting on the sofa, a thin blanket draped over the two of them. Ryan had his head tilted slightly toward her, his eyes half closed, his breathing steady. The sight made Emily's heart ache with a strange feeling, both tender and bewildering. Gently, she slipped her arm out from under the blanket and stood up. Her bare feet touched the floor softly, careful not to make a sound. She needed a little space to sort through the tangled thoughts in her mind. Stepping into the kitchen, Emily took a deep breath. The familiar smell of coffee, the morning sun, the chirping of birds outside the garden, all of it reminded her of the present. Last night had been real, a moment where she allowed herself to be vulnerable, to lean on someone. But this morning, it's morning already, Emily whispered to herself, her hands trembling slightly as she held a glass of water. In her mind echoed nameless questions. Would Ryan regret it? Were the things they shared last night just a fleeting moment that, come morning, both would wish to forget? Soft footsteps sounded. Emily turned, catching sight of Ryan standing at the kitchen doorway, his hair slightly tousled, his eyes still carrying traces of sleep. "You're up early," Ryan said with a small smile, his voice husky. Emily forced a smile, hugging the cup in her hands like a shield. "I didn't sleep much, and you?" Ryan stepped closer, stopping just a few steps away. "Me neither. This morning, I was afraid you'd regret it." Emily froze. Ryan had spoken aloud the very fear she hadn't dared admit. She pressed her lips together, lowering her gaze to her hands. "I don't know, Ryan. I'm just scared. Scared of myself, scared of what I'm feeling." Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes filled with sincerity. "Emily, I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know I'm here. I'm not running away. And I'm not pretending last night didn't happen." Those words made Emily's eyes sting. She raised her hand to cover her mouth, trying to hold back a wave of emotion. "Ryan, I'm afraid of messing everything up. You're young. You deserve a clear, stable life, not to be caught up in someone else's mess." Ryan shook his head, stepping one bit closer, carefully maintaining enough space not to overwhelm her. "You're not pulling me in. I chose to step in, Emily." The word Emily, spoken from his lips instead of Ms. or ma'am, made her pause slightly. She looked up, meeting his gaze, unhurried, unpressuring, just quietly waiting for her to open her heart. A single tear slipped from the corner of Emily's eye. She let out a small laugh through a sob, both sad and quietly relieved. "You really don't let me know what to do with you." Ryan tilted his head slightly, smiling gently. "Then don't do anything. Just let yourself feel, let yourself live, let yourself be happy, just once." Emily softly set the cup down on the table. Her heart tightened, filled with both fear and courage. She didn't know what awaited them ahead, but at least this morning they had been honest with each other. Emily sat down on the kitchen chair, her hands tightly clasped together on her lap. Her heart was still beating fast, not because she was afraid of Ryan, but because she was afraid of herself, afraid of the boundaries she had allowed herself to cross. Ryan still stood there, silently watching her. After a moment, he pulled out a chair and sat across from her, resting his elbows on the table, his gaze gentle but steady. "Emily," Ryan began, his voice warm and low, "we don't have to rush to define everything. I know what's between us is very new. I'm not expecting answers right away." Emily lifted her eyes to him, surprised by his maturity. "Ryan, you don't understand. I'm so much older than you, more experienced, and I'm afraid you're confusing kindness with something else." Ryan smiled softly, lowering his head as if in thought. "Maybe at one point I might have thought that. But, Emily, last night wasn't about kindness. It was two lonely people finding each other, finding a little warmth that both needed. And this morning, I don't regret it." Those words made Emily feel both embarrassed and comforted. She shook her head, her voice hoarse. "I'm afraid of hurting you, Ryan. You're young. You have a long life ahead. You don't need to be tied down by these impulsive feelings." Ryan reached out, not to touch her, but to place his hand on the table, an open gesture, waiting. "I don't feel tied down. I just want to be here, beside you, right now, today, not forcing you into anything, just letting you know I'm here and I'm not going to disappear." Emily felt a thin layer of ice inside her heart quietly crack. All these years, she had told herself she was strong, that she didn't need anyone. But it turned out hearing this simple promise made her feel fragile. "Ryan," she whispered his name, her voice trembling slightly. Ryan looked at her, patient. I know this isn't easy. I'm ready to go slow, ready to wait for you to figure things out. Just please, don't push me away. Those words tightened Emily's throat. How long had it been since anyone told her they were willing to be patient for her? How long had it been since she dared believe she was worth waiting for? Emily took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with tears. She didn't rush to say anything, only slowly reached out and gently touched Ryan's hand on the table. I I can't promise anything yet, Ryan, but I won't push you away, she whispered, a fragile smile spreading across her lips. Ryan gave her hand a light squeeze, his gaze glowing with warmth and quiet strength. That's enough, Emily. Enough for today. In that moment, the small kitchen seemed to transform into a refuge, a place where two lonely souls had found a bit of peace. No need for far off promises, no need for binding commitments, just patience, gentleness, and a little hope to move forward together. The days that followed passed slowly, as if life itself understood that Emily and Ryan needed time to breathe, to untangle the knots in their hearts. Emily returned to her daily routine, but everything had shifted. When Mark came back from his business trip, Emily greeted him with the familiar, gentle smile, playing the part of the caring wife, but deep inside, a part of her had quietly closed. She realized that her loneliness didn't just come from the days Mark was away, but from the invisible distance that had long existed between them. Ryan continued to show up, but he didn't rush, didn't push things forward. He would stop by just to bring Emily her favorite coffee, to ask how she was doing that day, to sit quietly with her on the porch as the evening sky turned red. One evening, Emily sat in the living room, flipping through old photos, images of her and Mark on their wedding day, of family gatherings, of Ryan as a smiling little boy. All of them reminded her that life was a series of changes. Well, I mean, Ryan walked in, saying nothing, simply sitting down beside her. I remember, Emily whispered, her eyes still on the pictures. I remember everything we once had. But I also understand now that not everything can be held onto forever. Ryan nodded, his gaze gentle. No one's asking you to forget, Emily, but sometimes to keep living, we have to dare to step out of the past. That simple yet profound statement made Emily's heart tremble. She wondered when Ryan, the young man she had once seen as someone small, someone needing protection, had become the one teaching her these things. And so little by little, Emily began learning how to take steps forward, not to leave Mark, not to tear down what she had, but to carve out a small space where she could live true to her feelings, to nourish herself. She and Rylan didn't rush to define their relationship. They let it remain a presence, an emotional anchor, a connection without urgency. Ryan helped Emily laugh again, helped her see that she was not just a wife, not just a middle-aged woman left behind, but still Emily, a woman who deserved to be heard, to be loved, to be seen. In the days that followed, Emily began devoting more time to herself. She went for walks in the park, signed up for the art class she had always dreamed of, reached out to old friends she had lost contact with. Ryan would show up from time to time, sometimes just to bring her a bouquet of wildflowers or simply to sit silently with her on the porch, watching the sunset. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be days when she felt lost, afraid, selfish for wanting more for herself. But she also knew that now she was no longer alone. And so, amid the turbulent days, Emily began rebuilding a new version of her life. A life where she didn't exist solely as a wife or the keeper of a family, but as herself, a woman learning to love herself, learning to open her heart, learning to believe that even in a life full of loss, there was still room for new things to bloom. Emily stood alone on the porch, watching as the evening light gradually turned the sky golden. She gently closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Inside her, there was no longer only sadness or memories of the past, but also a fragile yet genuine glimmer of hope. Ryan stepped out beside her, saying nothing, simply standing quietly by her side. Together, they looked ahead, toward the life that was still unfolding, where wounds were slowly healing, where beautiful new things awaited their discovery. She knew the journey ahead wouldn't be perfect, wouldn't be without challenges. But Emily was ready to move forward, not just for Ryan, but for herself, the woman who was learning once again how to love herself. Have you ever experienced moments like Emily when loss and loneliness seemed to swallow everything, but then someone or something gently touched your life and made you start believing in hope again? Share your story in the comments below. I believe that every story you share holds the power to reach the heart of someone out there who feels lost and needs a bit of empathy.